Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Adrian Koehler, so happy to have you on the BriteVibe podcast today, my friend. Thank you for taking time to visit with us today.
Of course, Matt. Great to be here, man.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit in pre-show. Tell us a little bit, what is Take New Ground? Let's just start there for everybody listening. If they haven't heard of Take New Ground, what exactly is that?
Yeah, so we are a leadership consulting firm. Not as boring as that already sounds. We love leaders. We love leaders. But the way we decide to engage leaders is we're fierce advocates for leadership. Mm-hmm. And that's way beyond a leader, because every leader can lead really well on a Tuesday and and lead shitty on Wednesday. Right. So we're really committed to the type of leadership that's necessary to generate results, lead a team well, and master themselves. Those are the three main buckets of conversations we have with people. So we come in, I spend most of my time coaching really successful, fast moving, frustrated founders. Okay. And then we come in and help them clean up whatever's, there's always things to be cleaned up, and help them engineer teams or re-engineer teams, or as they're scaling leadership below them. Anyway, there's an assortment of focuses we take on, but really we're very boutique in the sense that everything's really customized. We're not, nothing comes out of the can for us. We have nothing's in the can, or whatever they say. There's not sign up for sales leadership 101 class and that type of Carnegie type bullshit. But everything's very much connected to current reality, which is both really scary as well as it's helpful for people.
Interesting. And so I guess the first question that comes to top of mind is, when you are in these organizations around these founders and leaders, what makes a really good leader? I know that sounds like a fundamental question, but I like the fact that you're kind of we're going to get in there and do the work. So so what makes a good leader? What's kind of that in your mind, that definition?
Yeah, I probably have a really long answer to this. I'll see if I can make it short.
We've got 45 minutes an hour. You take as long as you need to.
That's a wonderful question. Yeah. Well, I'll start philosophically. So a really great leader can presence leadership, because leadership is leading, is, we talk about it like a noun, but it's never a noun. It's something that's happening. It's a phenomenon. It's either occurring or it's not occurring. And we all know what this feels like when we're waiting in line at fucking Wendy's or whatever. Sorry, can I use language on this? I can watch my language. Okay, good.
You just hello. And I was going to say, in your bio, it said at one point you were a pastor. So I was like, were you a pastor?
Well, welcome to why I'm not a pastor anymore. But
right. Okay, good. We've got that out on the table. We're going to be
okay. Good.
We'll address that later.
Yeah, sure. So leadership is a phenomenon, and we know. I guess I was thinking about there's a lot of leaderless moments, or somewhere moments when leading isn't happening. Right. So what else is happening? Complaining, some kind of lethargy, some kind of despair is happening. A lot of stalemating, a lot of politicking. All that is not leadership. Obviously, it's things we do to justify not leading and not stepping up with courage to advance and have the conversations that are necessary. So that's first thing, is someone that can presence leadership, which is usually a deep commitment to a vision. Right. And a vision's always just a picture of the future. The future's a fantasy anyway. There's no way around that reality. Right. What's happening next is always made up. But are they committed to something, like a future that's worth having? And the caveat there is worth having is what am I willing to sacrifice for? And there's a lot of sacrifice that's necessary. So really committed to a future worth having. At the same point, really committed to having a sober connection to reality. And people love to talk about visionary leaders, and people love to talk about leadership as if it's about the future, and it is. A lot of the sticking points and challenges for the people that we work with is that connecting to current reality is actually the harder part, right? And because that's the much more relational game. Because I can relate to an ideal a lot easier than I can relate to a senior leader that I've had for 7 years, and he's not quite as good as he was whenever I hired him, and things are complicated now, and he's got 12 kids and blah 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 blah. Right. And we've got all of our own BS too, of our own history and things that we that are our weaknesses or things that we'd like to avoid. And most people just spend their lives trying not to let that stuff bother them enough that it becomes a big problem. And right. And
yes, totally.
You know, like Kierkegaard's got that very annoying yet captivating quote that men find a level of despair that's tolerable and call that happiness. And so if there's things in our lives, great leaders are in a really authentic conversation about their own inauthenticity, I would say. So, we're all inauthentic. We're all full of shit at times. And leaders are authentic about that and can deal with that. And if they do that honestly, they come off really honest, and they come off very real, and they come off very teachable, and they come off really committed to the outcome and are willing to step into whatever's necessary to make that outcome happen. And so there's times in which they're very loving and very jovial and encouraging and awesome. And then there's times that they're really, they're taking a stand for something, and they are enforcing and less warm, because that's what's needed. Sometimes they're really frank, and sometimes they're more diplomatic, and sometimes they're really dogmatic or certain, and sometimes they're really open and reflective. So all of that is needed. Great leaders know how to live in those tensions.
It sounds like you're describing bipolarism.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. I get it.
Yes.
Well, it is that way.
That sounds extremely bipolar. That makes sense.
Well, it is. Well, it depends on how
the situation. Right?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you've called yourself to as a leader as well. So I can be really one way, and that's going to attract certain types of people and generate a certain type of mark in the market, and so that's cool. Or I can also have room and see myself as a work in progress. Like I'm going to naturally be, you could probably tell, I'm going to naturally be pretty frank and to the point, but and that works with all of my clients. That really works. If they don't like frankness, they're not going to like me, which is cool. I don't have a problem with that. But there's certain moments when I'm working now with a senior team and they don't know me at all. And I'm, I coach their boss. So I'm obviously the guy in the room. And so I know I need to really soften up in order to connect to him.
Right.
So I'm not going to die on the hill of quote unquote who I am, which is a made up concept anyway, but who I am in order to keep my own quote unquote integrity, instead of, oh, no, I'm going to define integrity as integrating all these possibilities for myself.
And you leave lots of little nuggets just along the way that we could just go right into, couldn't we?
Whatever
It's
you
just
want to talk about,
this
man.
is fun. So, like when you're doing the air quotes, I'm like, well, every one of those air quotes is a topic right there by itself. So
I can come back as many times as you want.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I need the help. I hope the listeners do, but I need the help.
Me too, man.
So if that's a great leader, what typically then, you come in and are kind of the cleanup crew, right? Your cleanup crew make things kind of get stuff up. You were talking about the elephant in the room before pre-show. And so and I know every situation's different. I'm talking very general ideas here, but where do the wheels leave the track? Where's the train usually leave the track? And it's like, okay, this is where do you get the call? Basically, right? At what point are you getting the call to come in? And because the leader or the leader founder, whoever's running that deal is like, okay, it's some this is not working. I got to figure out how to make it work. Right. So what do you usually step into at that point?
Well, there's two plot points you're talking about. At least I make it up. There's when do I get the call and when should I have gotten the call?
Right. Of course.
So there's things we have this we call it the shit sandwich analogy. Where
is that a technical term? Is that like an industry jargon technical term?
Yeah, exactly.
Does it stand for something? SHIT? Do I need a sudden? Right.
Sudden hit. Anyway.
Right. Trauma. The end one's trauma.
Right. Yep. We go back to it was my dad's fault.
Internalized trauma. That's the last two. IT.
Amen. Right? Amen. So, but we call it the shit sandwich analogy because issues show up as a shit hors d'oeuvre, and most people don't want to eat a shit hors d'oeuvre because I don't like eating shit hors d'oeuvres. That's great. I just send it back to the kitchen. They serve me a shit sandwich, and if we push that away as well, don't deal with what's here, then that comes back as a 2-course meal, and they push that away and they wait till the shit buffet shows up, and that's usually when I get the call. So, but where does it show up? It shows up when a leader decides that I don't have enough time to deal with this today. That's usually the conversation. Whatever's happening, I'll deal with this later. I'll deal with this later. Or that's just him. Or, there's lots of conversations that are the beginnings, right? Like the clouds on the horizon, but they're the beginnings, because it's happening between their head. They're already forming up a narrative about why this small issue is not worth dealing with. And small things get big naturally.
Okay.
Welcome to whatever the first, second, third, whatever rule of thermodynamics, like things grow.
Okay.
Like the world goes into chaos
Yeah.
naturally.
Right.
Newton or whatever, whoever.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
things devolve until leaders step in. So it happens early. But why? But then they call me when the pain's high enough, and usually they've
Mm-hmm.
talked to a client of mine. I don't market externally at all. I'm not. I mean, it'd be fine to talk to strangers. I just don't need. We don't need to. We've got lots
Right.
of work that comes in just because somebody's at lunch with a buddy of theirs and they're
Right.
complaining about something, and they're like, "Oh, you need to talk to my guy."
Right. Yep.
And because usually the person is my client is done listening to the same complaint over and over again. It's like, can you go deal with this guy?
Right.
You know, so yeah, I mean, all the other plot points is, high talent is leaving. That's a big pain point for people because it's very costly to both the morale and the bottom line. Or like they want to do something big, but they know that the team's not ready for it. And there's like a conversation going on internally, culturally, and finally they know they got to come in and shift this whole thing up. Or, the leader is just finally looks in the mirror and is just tired of settling. And they, decide to at least I wonder what I'm doing.
Right.
And, they kind of are tired of like living the persona of having all their shit together and want to actually get real.
Right. Which is very scary for a leader. I mean, that's
yeah.
I mean, there's typically, in my role in life, I'm typically an owner of whatever it is or owner in whatever I'm doing. And I remember being just terrified of being actually authentic with what was actually happening in my life or with the company, because I thought the minute people see that I don't have it together or I'm not the rock that they think I am, people are going to leave, people are going to start talking. There's going to be gossip. There's going to be rumors. Everybody's going to think, what do I do now? Or, so there's a lot of, and I think that's probably what all of us as human beings in any interaction with others, and I'll call that social, but any interaction with others, there's some degree of that kind of holding the cards to the vest. I think in a leader, in a perceived or real leadership role, that is a real fear. So how do you help leaders navigate that?
Well, it is a fear, but it's based on an interest, right? So one of the survival interests, there's like 4 core survival needs as we talk about them. Looking good, that's what we're talking about. Feeling good, like having some sense of comfort. Being right, and then being in control. Those are 4 survival needs as we talk about them. And we're not the only people that talk about those, but those are 4 survival needs: look good, feel good, be right, be in control. So it's an interest, and it's an interest. It's just a short-term interest. So, if I keep banking on or keep living out of this desire to look a certain way to myself, that's usually where it's rooted, and then to other people. Because even if I think it's them, it's actually me.
Right.
Because like who was it, Skinner or whatever? Somebody said, you can tell I'm really great on the quotes. I'll just say, I said, remember that one time I said?
Yeah. These are all your quotes. These are original.
This idea of the looking glass self, like I think about me, what I think you think about me.
Right. Yep. Got it.
So, if I were to share this, they're going to what? They're going to look for the exit. They're going to not follow me. They're going to not trust me. And so therefore I'm going to hold this back. And we won't even test if that hypothesis is true, because actually the opposite is usually true, is that the emperor usually has no clothes.
Right.
Where it's like, I always joke, like when a leader comes to an epiphany, they're the last one to the party. Everybody knows, man. It's like a leader is finally telling me, hey, I think I'm really, hate to say this, but I think I'm really disorganized. I was like, I know you are. And by the way, if I brought all your people in, of course, they know you don't know what you're talking about. Or, they know you're not very organized. And you get out of your shame story about it and get into solving the issue, which is hiring organized people. Right. And being humble enough to accept the help.
Right.
So,
which is also hard for most leaders and most things, is being open enough. You called it humble enough to actually accept others' help. Right. That's a scary thing too for leaders. Yeah.
And by humble, I mean grounded. And by that, I mean like substantiated, because, most people, because we're human beings, this isn't us. This is since the beginning of time.
Human nature. Yeah.
Human nature is to wait for safety to take a risk.
Yep.
Period. Yep. Now, I work mostly entrepreneurs. They usually have a high risk threshold, but so they're high risk threshold in business, but not as high risk personally.
Right.
Most of them. Yep. They can tend to be very fragile, actually. Some of the more fragile people I know.
Okay. I'll just write it down. You continue with your thought. I'll just write it down. We'll come back. You're just giving me too much stuff, but that's good. Well, that's good. That's okay. That's what makes it fun. So I apologize. I wrote
no, it's okay. You have a non-subtle way of being subtle. I love that about
you. Yeah, it's kind of like I'm not gonna be. Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna butt in, but I'll park it.
Let's see if I can remember what I was saying.
Okay,
about the train off the rails.
Oh, the transparency, the vulnerability, and the scariness of right. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Oh, people asking for help and being substantial.
Yeah.
So it's like we keep waiting for safety instead of generating security.
Right.
That's the distinction I think about all the time. Like if I'm grounded and humble, like I know that I'm a mixed bag. I'm sinner and saint. I am like awesome and horrible. I'm truthful and not truthful. I'm authentic and and I know that about myself. I'm this mixed bag, and I'm not busy trying to look a certain way, and I'm not busy trying to prove it because I'm trying to look a certain way. Then I can really be open. And I want to be open because I'm really committed. I'm really committed to my own transformation over the long haul. And I'm going to have seasons where that's going to be very vibrant. I'm going to have really dark times in the desert or whatever you want to call it. And, but if I'm done proving that I'm perfect to myself because I fear death, that's usually where that comes from, then I want to be really open. And that level of openness that somebody can presence is a huge invitation because they're scared to death too.
Right.
They're even more scared than you are because you're financially successful and they're the one that's dependent on you. And so if actually you share what's going on for you, like, and it's a both and, right? It's not like you give up your commitment. You're just like honest about what's happening back to the future and current reality is, hey, here's what we're committed to. I also don't know how we're going to figure this out, but we're going to figure it out. Like that's the both and. Like, I don't know. And we're going to go find out. Or I don't know, and I need a lot more input because I'm missing it. I don't know.
Right.
We didn't hit this quarter's goals, and so I must be missing something. I need you guys.
Nice. Yeah.
And that level of presence is usually an invitation for people to say, "Oh, wow, this person, I can trust them." Instead of what most people do is try to put on a show, which is really human. Me too, by the way. Just try to put on a show, and that's usually what's eating people's lunch.
Interesting. And so, how do you? Okay. So I'm going to step back then to my comment I was going to ask a little bit ago. And I know we're all over the board, but hey, just run with us. Man. It's fun, right? Just as a listener. Yeah, that's right. Let's dance. I got your Huckleberry.
Yes. Right? Yes. Now, if you make a tombstone quote, now we're real friends. Now we're real friends.
Oh, here we go.
You should watch the new Val Kilmer documentary, by the way. It's great.
I haven't watched it yet. I saw that. I think on Netflix or somewhere I saw that advertised, but I have not watched it yet. Fragile.
You know what it means, by the way? Can I nerd out? Do you know what it means? I'm your Huckleberry. I didn't know this till like a week ago.
No, I did, and I have not. I have slept
since
I went back and looked at because I'm nerdy, meaning nerdy in the way that anytime I love watching shows that are either documentaries or shows based on real events, but then I have to go search those real people and those real events and say how close is this to the actual thing.
I love it.
So I've done a lot of reading on Doc Holliday.
Amazing.
He was a dentist, and the tuberculosis. I mean, stuff most people know, but I grew up in Kansas, and I grew up literally 40 minutes from Dodge City. So I have to. I'm like, it's in my. I'm named after I think Matt in Gunsmoke.
Amazing.
Matt Dillon, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm all about the Old West. But
that's great, man.
But let's go ahead and get into the Huckle. I'm your.
I'm a nerd in a lot of those ways as well. And God bless the nerds, man. Even I'll give a brief caveat. So my wife and I just got married. Second marriage for both of us. We got married in late May, and she's Jewish and heavy on the ish. And it's funny. Like, she's now just bought a menorah and we're going to do that. But she warned the kids. She's like, knowing you're dead, we're going to have to learn all about Hanukkah now. Now, she's the Jewish one, but if we're going to do it, damn it, we're going to get clear about what this is about.
Right. That's
so
right.
Anyway, I've been a sucker for, Tombstone was my favorite movie forever.
Oh,
it might still be number one. But anyway, my business partner just told me, I'm your Huckleberry. Huckleberry is pallbearer.
Oh, nice. I did. I did not remember that. Yeah. I'm your pallbearer.
Isn't that perfect? I'm your pallbearer. Here we go, baby. Let's dance.
I'm your ride or die, as they would say, right now.
Yeah.
I'm your I'm your day one, right? That's what I heard not too long ago. So fragile. You mentioned this word fragile. You said a lot of the leaders
I work with,
are fragile. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. What I don't mean is, That's a great question. What I
Yay,
don't
Matt.
mean is
Yeah.
unsubstantial, or what I don't mean is like aren't fucking awesome, like aren't rock
Right.
stars. What I
Okay.
do
Yeah.
mean is that usually their universe around them has set them up to need to keep up this
Facade.
veil.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they can get really touchy very quickly and end up showing up like maniacs
Mm.
if it really seems that things are off anywhere.
Mm.
So they end up coming off really controlling, micromanaging, irate at times, emotional, like quote unquote emotional, like, but emotional. I like emotional, but emotional in a way that doesn't work for other people. Really dogmatic, like all these types of things. Like they're really oh, what's the phrase I've heard at times? Like
Thin-skinned.
they're
Thin-skinned.
thin-skinned, but like that their
Well,
nerves are on the outside of their body.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
everything is like,
Yep.
and especially if they've been successful, if they are successful in a brand, and usually the brand has been very much about them for a long time. Like every great brand starts as founder driven,
Yep.
and then becomes very attached in that way. So a lot of their challenges are trusting other people with the brand, because the brand has been them necessarily for sometimes for a long period of time. And
Right.
so, think they're threatened quickly is what I mean by fragile, I guess. They're threatened really quickly instead of seeing opportunity in threats, or even like befriending the threat, which is where I would go, is like, how do I, put an arm around and make an ally something that used to seem as a threat?
Got it. And I can see that in the friends that I have that are in those positions. And I can, I see it myself, obviously, as well. And ultimately, they're trying to protect an identity because that identity got them certain accolades, money, success, adoration, high standing in community. All that boils down to I'm safe because people know me, adore me, love me. They're not going to kill me, right? So, so yeah, that makes sense. So that
they settle. I like the word adoration. I've been thinking about that a lot recently, but they settle for adoration instead of respect.
Got it. And that makes, and that, it was just interesting how you used the word fragile, because I had not, I would say almost, insecure would be a word I would throw out there. And I've known several successful people, many actually, not, and certainly by no means all, but many successful people were driven by their insecurity. They had to overcome, they had to conquer, because it was a way of basically saying, don't look at the insecurities I've got, look at how awesome I am in this area. And in this area happens to be business, and look, I'm making millions of dollars. So don't notice that I'm scared to death that you're going to find out that I'm a fraud, right? Even though I'm technically not a fraud, because technically we've made all this, we've done all these things, but I still feel like a fraud inside. So there's that whole weird human dynamic happening.
Yeah. And if they're busy spending their lives trying not to be a fraud, then that's inherently it's, playing not to lose.
Right.
Instead of playing to win.
Right.
Instead of playing to win. It's like, I just don't want to be a fraud. And that can be one of Adler. I got this one right. Adler's ideas was that human beings have these life lies, he calls them, like whatever the life lie is. A lot of ours, especially whoever came up with the vernacular around imposter syndrome, everybody attached to that quickly, right? Because it's that whole idea that I'm a fraud. People don't know I look different than how I feel, which is almost always true. It ought to be true. I mean, if I'm really feeling really insecure, but I just got paid a lot of money to go do this keynote, I need to go fake it. I need to summon myself to the surface. And if I go offer this kind of bumbling, scared to death little boy,
you're not going to,
but you could, that's an extreme example, but same with a team. And ironically, if you bring that to the table and integrate that in instead of keep trying to push it away, because whatever, like my own fraudulentness can fuel me towards having real deep compassion for other frauds in my life. But if I don't put my arms around it, then I'm going to keep avoiding them because they remind me of the part of me I don't want to talk about.
Right. And so there's a lot of psychology there, if you want to call it that. I know that's probably, it's deeper than that, but how do you, that seems like a lot to navigate in an organization.
It is a lot to navigate.
Yeah.
It is.
So how does that work exactly? I mean, and I know you say every case is different, but in general, if we can generalize, how do you get people just to be real, even if, at every level, because you're what you're talking about, we're not just getting the leader to be real. You're also getting everybody else in the room who they're leading. Everybody's responsible for leading themselves, but how do you get people to be authentic without freaking out?
Well, I want to normalize everything.
Okay.
So this is just human 101 stuff.
Okay.
Like human beings, because we're mammals, we live out of intention, period.
Mhm.
We're
Okay.
not ever not living out of intention.
Mm.
We can prove that neurologically. We'll come up with lots of stories about where and when that's not true. But I live in that extreme because I know it's true. Like, so even when shit's broken and it's not working, I want to own current reality and say, hold on, I wonder why we don't want this to work. And they're going to like fight me and blah, blah, blah. And we'll spend 15 minutes talking about how I don't know what I'm talking about, which is fine.
Right.
That's great. But I'm not getting off it, because if you don't own the now, you'll never get what's next.
Interesting. Okay.
Like, why do we want things to be the way they are? And what conversations are we in about justifying why they are, instead of, inquiry and wondering, what about this makes it satisfying? Like with the level, let's just say, let's give an example. Like, let's say there's a team and the leadership team. Oh, let's just say there's one person on the team. Let's call him Tim.
And do we have his last name so I can Google him?
I used to call him. I used to all the time call that guy in my head Tom. But then in this last, we do a couple of public trainings. There was a guy named Tom, and he was hilarious. And so anytime I'd make an analogy, call Tom, he would always be like this,
and it would screw up,
pointing him to him, like, stop talking about me, man.
That's hilarious.
So anyways, like, let's just imagine there's and this happens in every leadership team probably around. There's a guy named Tim that we keep around because he's talented, but he's not great to work with.
Right.
Now that works for everybody at play. If it didn't work, things would be shifted. But everybody's got stories. Tim's got a story about why he has to be that way, usually because he's the CFO most of the time, not always, or the operations guy, the guy that's like on the ground. And if I'm not a dick around here, then people are just going to follow this visionary and we're going to be screwed. And so whatever, it's not all pie in the sky, but there's all this like vernacular to justify being a cynic. And then there's all like the people, there's the vision person, there's the people that say, oh man, Timmy's so hard to work with, but at least he fill in the blank. Right. I want to work around him. And let's have this meeting and not have Tim here, and all this type of behavior. And they'll complain about how hard it is, but nobody's talking to Tim about it. Right. Like nobody wants to go have a conversation with Tim about, hey man, how why are you doing this? Like, right. You would like your brilliance would get to the table if you actually packaged your brilliance in a way that works for us. Right. But why, and get behind that conversation and actually satisfy some of those concerns. And similarly, the other way, like why most HR professionals I don't talk to.
Well, so then so in this situation that you're giving us an example, so how do you facilitate that conversation? How do you get resolve to that if people want resolve, I guess, first, right? Sure. Well, I start always by talking about results. Okay. So, and that's both results, quantifiable and experiential. So a lot of teams will talk about quantifiable results, but they won't talk about what also really matters to us, almost as much as results as experience. Okay. Because we do most things in our life to generate some kind of experience for us. And so most misery or despair in our lives happens because we've given up on the possibility of enjoying the experience on the way to success. And, and so there's just these foils in our life, like Tim, is that what I call them? Like Tim. Yeah, Tim. Yeah. And like, so he's the reason, and my job sucks, but I'm gonna hang on because the payday's coming in 3 years when we sell or whatever. And we're just justified. And so anyway, when we get committed to the result, which is both those two things I talked about, both experiential and outcome, then naturally what's going to happen is all the resistance is going to come up, which is all those justifications, reasons why it can't or it won't work. I don't have power here. There's like dynamics or circumstances and all that, all of like casting essentially reasons why outside of ourselves. And that's a long list, long list of reasons why. To justify why things aren't what they could be. Got it. And so essentially kind of like, we'll talk about the resistance, and I'll just talk about how we're all doing this. We've all got these stories, and I get people really participating instead of just me, being a lecturer at I get people talking. And then, we get a chance to really reinvent ourselves because we've had payoffs to complaining. Number one, we never complain without some kind of payoff. That's the reason why we do it. Yep. So, but there's always prices to complaining as well.
So what prices are we paying? What trade are we making under the table? It's always an under the table negotiation. It's not conscious, even for some of us. Definitely for some, it is conscious, but they've just decided that that's the
way to play the game.
That's the way to play the game.
Yep.
And are you up for trying something new, or do you want to be this miserable? And then you got to get people to a place of choice. And otherwise, it's just gonna be more of the same.
Right. Of course. Well, there's a reason you're standing in the room, right?
That's right.
Somebody in that room wants something different. Otherwise, you literally are not there having that conversation.
Right on. And if it's not the top leader, if the top leader isn't willing to reinvent the thing, then we don't stay very long because it's not going to work.
Right.
And we've given up on plenty of contracts and said, hey, you know what? Hey, we're 2 months into this year-long thing, and you don't want to do this. You don't want to have any of the conversations we're pointing at, which is no problem. But keep it up. Call me back in a year. Let me know how it's going. Because the shit sandwich is going to keep growing.
Right.
So, but if a leader takes us on and says, hey, you know what? I'm not giving up the stand to both get us to where we need to go and to have a team that really loves itself. Which people don't talk about love in the business context. That's fine. But that's what's missing usually is like real advocating for each other. Like, I want the best for you. And what do you want, by the way? We all have very different conversations about why we're at the table, but rarely do we ask anybody the question. Like, why do you work here? Like, what is this for you? Like, why this job? You could have done 15 jobs. Why this job? And we don't see people, you see tools usually to get stuff done. So if you humanize the conversation, and then, start to care about each other in the process, which is actually going to require of me what I wish other people would, the price. How do I want to say that? It's going to require me to pay the price I wish other people were willing to pay. Right. So giving people the benefit of the doubt, like, we always say a broken commitment's a cry for help, but people don't orient that way. A broken commitment is a reason to go bash somebody instead of like, oh, he said he was going to get this done. And most people get pissed instead of get curious. And like, oh, I love this guy. I believe this guy. Let me go find out. Is he okay? Number one, is he okay? Number two is what was missing? Like, what was missing from me even, that he couldn't deliver on his outcome. And did I even care? Oh, shit, I didn't even care at all. I just said that thing. And then, a month later acted like, he ought to do this all by himself. So if you humanize but if a leader makes the shift, that was my point. If a leader makes the shift, then that naturally raises the bar because personal responsibility goes through the roof. Like that as a value, like personal responsibility. And then people leave, which is great because they don't want to play. It's like if you raise the bar, some people don't want to shift and they just want to complain the rest of their career. And you just stop tolerating that shit. Right. Like we have a no gossip policy in my company. If anybody says anything like to me about my business partner, I'll listen, I'll hear it all out. That's great. And I'll say, have you told Dan? Right. Have you told Dan this? And they'll always say no, figuratively speaking, because this doesn't happen in my company. But
because you'll fire them.
Because I'll do this. If I'll say, have you talked to Dan about that? If their answer is no, I'll say, great. You've got 48 hours to tell Dan. Or I will. Right. So Dan's going to hear about it in 48 hours, either from you or from me. You make the call. It's better if it comes from you. Let's go. And I'll help them think about how to do that and how to bring it up and blah, blah, blah. But, we squash gossip hardcore. It's people are either going to be connected through their There's two things that connect human beings, either promises, which is what I'm committed to for you and what future I'm saying, or we connect through bitterness.
Brought up a big question for me when you're talking about, that we squash gossip. How do we do that without crushing communication? And because I agree, gossip is a cancer. And so I'll first state that. So I'm not debating that is the case, but how do you provide healthy pathways for people to communicate when they're frustrated? I guess.
Great. Well, first, okay, good. So we're back to some principles. So number one is everybody. How do I say this most clearly? The meaning of any communication. I'll start here. The meaning of any communication is in the listener, not in the speaker. And the source of any experience I have is me, not you. Right. So if I'm pissed at you, I'm responsible for my anger, not you. Even if you do something that really betrays me. If I'm like really hurt past the moment and I'm start to become resentful and start to build a case, that's no longer about you. Now it's about me and my rights and privileges and my entitlement that I have to do all this shit because I've been unwilling to get real with you and say, hey, Matt, when you did that, by the way, 8 months ago, when you did that 8 months ago, it really hurt my feelings. It was, and people don't talk about like that because they just are used to they're used to being cordially, hypocritical. But instead it's like, hey, or that didn't, or even you could say it in more of a professional terms, like, hey, in that meeting, that was really disrespectful. And I think it took the meeting away and blah, blah, blah. And I think it disrespected me in front of our peers. Can you not do that anymore? Or why? I'm really curious, like that made sense to you in the moment to do that instead of all the other things to do. How come? Like what's missing from me that would make sense to you? The only way to communicate to me your frustration is passive aggressively. Like there is an answer to that question. There's something missing in the relationship.
Of course. Yeah. Right.
So, you said, how do you open up channels of communication? Well, you got to have people first own the source of their own communication to themselves about themselves. And that's them and what I'm making up and how I'm interpreting the world around me. So if people can own that's their game they're playing no matter what. And I say that's gravity, that whatever I think is real is my interpretation of the world.
Right. Of course.
Not what's happening.
Right. It's not the fact. It's your perception of the fact. Right.
Right on. So if you do that, then if I'm pissed at whomever, like a business partner or my wife or whatever, if I'm pissed, I got to wonder about why am I pissed? What is this about for me? And how can I either get off it and not have a conversation or go have a conversation if I can't get off it myself? If I look in the mirror and own my shit, then I'm usually off it because it's like, oh, damn. There's me again.
Right.
Or if it's like a thing, then I can just go have a conversation. But people don't like to be that courageous. They'd rather not stick their neck out and be on the hook for their own contribution to the breakdown. They'd rather just blame and shame and take credit and all that shit.
Yeah, of course. It's safe. Well, it feels safer in the moment.
It is safer short term. Right on.
Short term. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Short term gain.
Right. Yeah. And so I don't want to face my pain today. So I'm going to mask and not face my pain. And I'm going to pretend like that you are the persecutor and I'm the victim. And that way I feel right. I mean, there's a, drama triangle empowerment dynamic. We've had David Emerald on the show, but that's in every, I won't even say leadership, just communication skills, right? We get off when we believe that somebody's offended us or victimizing us in some way. So we start to not own, when we start to not own our own stuff, then typically we start deceiving ourselves and diluting our ideas and thoughts, right?
Right on. And we become less, right?
Yes.
All of a sudden our world becomes much smaller. Right. And I mean, I cut my teeth as a coach in prison. Like I coached murderers. So I ran a foundation. Most of our work was in the prison system. And I hired this guy, Dan Tacchini, who's now my business partner, to come in and lead this because he'd been doing it for about a dozen years. And it was a hobby of his. He was running a consulting firm and doing that. And this is before I got into the coaching work, but I was in these real conversation with murderers. Right. And picture 20 guys in a room. And we'd run a 3-day leadership training. And most people would say, what the hell are you doing? Why would you do that with lifers? Because they run the prison. That's why. And most prisons are criminal factories.
Right.
Not like a collection of criminals. They make people more criminal.
Right.
What makes people more criminal? It's not skill set. It's not the fact that they came from a certain neighborhood in LA or they didn't have a dad or whatever society is going to tell you. Culture is going to from their very Freudian view about I am my history. So I can't escape it. That's not true. What makes people more criminal is their aptitude to live in a victim mindset. We know that's true. And I've seen it. The crux of that training is to move people or invite people to move from a victim mindset to a responsible mindset. And all of a sudden when they're responsible, I'm in prison because I chose to be here. I killed that guy, not because of the gang or not because of my dad or not because of the color of my skin or any whatever very socially acceptable bullshit answers. I chose to be here. I made decisions and all of a sudden they're free. Because now they're not being run by their history. Like Freud very successfully convinced human beings that we are an etiological being. Like I am the effect of my cause, which is the past. I don't buy that at all.
I buy some of it, but I think we're the sum of our past, but certainly it's up to us to choose our future. right? I'm not going to escape all of the things that I've lived and enjoyed and endured. But if I allow those to limit me into my future, then I'm just as good as dead. Right. I
Right
mean,
on. Well,
I'm just a victim for the rest of, or whatever it is. I'm not, I've heard the term am I socially defined or self-authored? And you're kind of talking about the moment I realized that my past isn't, well, it may be affecting me. It doesn't have to limit me. Then all of a sudden, then I'm free, right? To your point, then I'm free to make new choices.
Right
on. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do in the human experience is to get to a point of choice where we're actually choosing what we want versus just replaying the patterns of the past.
Right on.
Right? Because of our fears, the way we were raised, all the environmental stuff. It's really tough to wake up one day and go, why am I racist? Or why am I a bigot? Or why am I an ass? Or why, whatever it is, whatever your thing is, we all have some degrees of it. I don't care who you are. We have some degrees of all this stuff. And it's kind of like, and for me, and I'm really talking about I'm leaning into my own personal experience. It's actually confusing. It's actually confusing when I'm waking up over the last really 3 years and going, it seems challenging sometimes to actually say, this is what I want because of past failures. I count my failures a lot bigger than I do my successes for some reason. But yeah, I think there's a point where it's like, it's a different level of ownership and it feels like a different level of responsibility. It's not a bad thing. It's just different.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
You're welcome.
Well, you good job.
Yes.
Well, you focus on the negatives just because you're human, and then 75% of the human brain focuses on negatives. So what are we going to do about that? Either we can even be a victim to that, or it is always an integration question. Like, how much of it do I want to be escaping my past?
Right.
Which that would be my micro nuance in what you're saying.
Right. That's good.
And that's normal, right? It's just normal. It's just so funny. It's like, oh, that shit happened and it was horrible. So how do I, naturally it's worse than me, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, which is probably the framework behind the victim mindset is like, there's that out there is what that out there, and that out there can be just my view of my history. But most people don't say it, my view of my history. Most people say my history. Right. Yes. My history. That happened, damn it. I'm like, I know it happened. Right. Now let's talk about the 1,000 different interpretations about what happened. Can we do that?
Right.
Like your dad didn't love you. Okay. I get your story about how that has fucked your life over and relationships with authority and blah, blah, blah. How is it an advantage? I don't know. There's no advantage. Oh, really? Okay. That's okay. If that's the cul-de-sac for your life, great. I'm not here for that.
Right.
You can pave a road right through that shit if you want to.
Right.
But even so, being willing to be curious about, even, I don't know, a mentor of mine always said, it's never too late to have it's never too late to have a good childhood. That's what he said. Right. Never too late.
And I think as we hopefully call it evolve or just become more aware, a lot of the things in my own childhood, I now count as blessings, right? I don't look at my childhood as which until I was about 35, I drug it as a badge of honor to not necessarily survive, but just be able to not succumb to the thoughts or the whatever was happening in the childhood. I had actually fairly decent childhood compared to some. But yeah, now I look back and I'm like so thankful that the way things played out the way they were. Otherwise I wouldn't be where you can't, it's kind of like, can you go back and change any one day and still be you in today's world? And you may not even, you may not like who you are today, but there's many benefits, kids, spouses, a roof over your head. There's a lot of still things to be grateful for, no matter what the past was.
Yeah. Right on. Well said. I was just thinking about, yes, I agree with all that. There's, it's just, at any point you can find, and this is not denial. This is where I think people like, oh shit, he wants to deny. No. But if you aren't willing to own the fact that you're living in an interpretation of your past, then there's nothing new going to come. Right. People can get to that point that I am not, I don't have a corner on the truth. I do have a corner on reality. Like I get to pick my own reality. And I'm criminal by nature, meaning I'm inauthentic.
Right.
And so and it's just going to show up in language all the time,
Mm-hmm.
And it shows up in any complaint I have. That's where I'm criminal. Like, I'd rather be right than fill in the blank.
Right.
That's the purpose of complaint, is I'm right and they're wrong.
Wrong.
It shouldn't have happened. My fill in the blank from my past was wrong. That person was wrong. The situation was wrong. God was wrong. Fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to settle for my own self-righteousness, which makes for a pretty small life.
Right.
And I'd rather not forgive. I'd rather hold on to all my offenses. and then fuck over anybody that is going to look like or act like anybody that I hate from my past.
Right.
And act like that's like the inevitable, that's the inevitable of existence of humans, just making the best of that. That's the Kierkegaard quote. Just make the best of that and just call it fine. That's what we call it. It's just fine. Instead of like, oh shit, I can actually forgive people.
Right.
And they can be a major offender in my life, and I don't give them the power to ruin my life.
Right.
I get to choose the quality of my life.
Mm-hmm. And don't we see so many examples of people that we revere as great leaders, back to the leadership conversation, that have done just that? And Nelson Mandela, who forgives his captors that have imprisoned him, right?
Right on.
The Pope, who goes to the prison where the guy that shot him, and he forgives the guy in prison. I mean, so there's so many examples of people that are the best examples for us, that actually use that forgiveness as a powerful thing to heal the relationships on both sides, right? And ultimately, yes, I think that's what we all can aspire to do, is to not forget or make excuses for what has happened, but forgive those things, because forgiveness, right? And I don't know how we got on this, other than you used to be a preacher, but forgiveness is all about you, not the other person, right? I mean, right? When we forgive, we release those shackles that are holding us in that event or in that trauma, right?
That's right.
Forgiveness is freedom from the stories or the minutia or the misconceptions that we have about that.
That's right. Yeah, I'm giving up the right of holding the offense. The etymology. I'm a nerd, so we talk about this stuff a lot. Yeah. Like the etymology of forgiveness is descend from, from the offense, right? So I'm going to forgive them for me. Yep. I'm forgiving them, but I'm doing it for me. I'm not going to hold this offense. Right. Because my life gets smaller. The more offenses I hold, the smaller my life gets. And so we talk about these dynamics, which seem non-businessy, but they're at the core. Anytime there's a human endeavor, human beings are going to show up, and we're going to do this shit. We're going to be right. All the survival needs. That's going to be normal. And And the guy that let me down 2 years ago, that I've spent the rest of I'll spend the rest of my career avoiding. That's just a forgiveness conversation.
Right.
It's usually a shame-based conversation as well. Like he reminds me of me, and damn it, I don't like that side of me. And I spend a lot of time and energy making sure you don't see me the way I'm scared you might see me.
Right. Exactly.
Now that usually that goes in the psychology chair for people, right? That's their best option.
Yeah. Right.
And that's why, we jump right into it, because it's the conundrum of humans, like generating their own experience, is what's at the core of in every boardroom and stuff. I mean, that's what's going on. We don't talk about it. And let's follow the agenda. Well, okay. We'll keep avoiding all the other shit.
Right.
The elephants in the room, we'll keep avoiding them.
Right. And yes, totally. Very interesting. And we're never going to be free until we kind of get to that place of forgive. I think, and now that I reflect back, that is when I've had moments of freedom, is in those moments where I actually forgave the situation, not even the person sometimes, but just the situation. And it was like, some of the best advice I ever got was from a shoe shine guy in the DFW airport when I was flying through. I used to wear dress clothes all the time back when that was a thing. And that was my self-care, getting my shoes polished, right? Because I was just and that was self-care. And so this guy's, I'm just asking him, about his life and all this stuff. And he, grew up in Dallas. His kids are there. His grandkids are there. And he's popping his rag and he says, burden or blessing, it's up to me. And I just went, I was like, wow, that's very burden or blessing. That's up to me. And I was like, so powerful. Right. Every event in our life is either, we are perceiving it as a burden or a blessing. And when we're perceiving it as a burden, it's weighing us down. It's an anchor. And I've seen so many people, and I'm sure we didn't get into your backstory, but so many people that come on this show have had something pretty serious happen to them from a trauma standpoint at some point in their life. And then they use that, they forgave the situation, they forgave themselves, they forgave the other person. And then they used it for rocket fuel to want to, kind of liberate others from that same thought process or that same thing. And it's just so amazing to be able to, I guess, visit about that, but talk to people in that space. It's
right on.
And so
this is why folks that won't integrate their own history, whether it's pain or their own self-betrayal, they won't integrate it. They just miss out.
Right.
They really miss out because it's like, I don't know where I said it recently on some article or something, but like my scars are my mentors. Like there's shit to keep learning from that.
Yep.
And while, like anybody got regrets, but it's like, I don't have to carry those around. Like they're actually probably the way to connect with somebody.
Right.
Especially if you're connecting with somebody you don't like, or is doing something that reminds you of where you were. Like it's a great time to like be confessional. We don't use that term in the business context either. But be confessional, like tell the truth about yourself, man. It's going to open shit up for you for sure. And other people. It's a huge invitation. Some people don't want that and they want to be all polished.
Right. And I would guess, and I know we're almost the top of the hour, but I would guess, the highest functioning teams are the most transparent with each other and build that emotional safety into the team because, I always grew up hearing that, business isn't personal. And I'm like, I think it's super personal. I mean, I think business and personal it's very personal, right? Because it's all about human interaction and human engagement. And we spend so much time doing it. How can it not be personal, right?
Yeah, it better be personal. To your point, yes. I mean, I don't use the word safety just because of how most people use it, because it's mostly circumstantial. Like once the coast is clear, then I can come out of the cave.
Got it.
And we aim at like the security thing, like, but people that can have a lot of room, we say, like for other people and their own experience and even on their own bad days or their own harshful terms or whatever, like their tones and saying things that are inappropriate. If we own all of our shit, we get that we're the same guy anyway. As like the person we're judging, we can be that way. So, but yes, the most transparent teams really willing to get real about what we really think about the future, get real about what's really needed right now. Those are the folks that like nothing gets in their way. They're anti-fragile or whatever you want to call them. Like, right. There's no circumstance they want to take on. There's no circumstance that can take them down. There's no challenge that's too high because they're wide open to what they need to learn, what they need to like get over. Most of the time, leaders, I say this about myself, I always need a lot more help than I want. I'd rather be a lone ranger. I'd rather have my shit together. I just can't build the life I want by myself. I can build a life.
You're looking in the mirror on that one, right? Oh. But it's not a very fulfilled life, right?
No, I can build a pretty good life, especially compared to others. I can build a pretty good life, but I just won't have the life that I really want.
Right.
If I don't ask for a whole bunch of help.
Exactly. I love it. Well, Adrian Koehler, thank you so much for coming on. You're going to have to come back on because I think we could deep dive a lot of different topics around leadership and around life. But yeah, certainly come back on. Do you encourage people to stay connected to you somehow or in your message? Or
I love to be connected to anybody.
Okay.
And thanks if anybody that's still listening. Thanks for still listening.
And so how do they connect with you?
Yeah, you can easily connect with me on social. I'm Adrian.K on Instagram and such. But we have lots of very honest, we would say, or like robust conversations on our podcast, the Naked Leadership Podcast. We talk about leadership as vulnerable and what it really takes to get very practical things done. It's practical. You could talk about how to hire people, how to let people go, how to deal with conflict, all the kind of the shit that bothers people. We talk about it's not like do it this way. 1, 2, 3. We get to that point, but we really talk about what we're up against as humans in order to get to that point, which most people won't or don't know how to or whatever. So we talk about contextually what's going on for folks and usually what they're unwilling to talk about and such. So that's the Naked Leadership Podcast.
Love it.
Check that out. There's lots of great stuff on there, 150-ish episodes or something.
Love it. Well, thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for your authenticity and just I love your transparency, authenticity, whatever you call it. It's beautiful. I think
thank you, man.
We need definitely more and more people are becoming more examples of that. And thank you for shining the light out there, brother. So come back on. Thank you so much. And you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you, man.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE Vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.